Good morning, good afternoon. Olivier, Jarosz, leading this panel on Goodbye Europe, Salam Alaikum World. I'm leading LTT Sports, Club Advisory and League Advisory. I'm also CEO of Accessible, an organization that deals with giving the rights for disabled fans who have better access to stadiums. And we're extremely happy to work with the Saudi Football Federation as well with FIFA with the Club World Cup, as we are providing for the whole week audio descriptive commentaries for blind people. Today, I'm very excited to ask questions to our panelists, where traditionally I rather answer, but I'm very lucky to have my colleague Eric Abidal, Ahmed Abou Gadaiel, and Juerg Kronenberg. But before that, I'd like to give you some hints about some information about the global report, which we launched last week with our friends from World Football Summit. And eventually, if you could bring, and I give a quick update on information about LTT Sports and also the situation. So here are the key learnings of the club report, because we try to look at what's going on in the world, especially outside of Europe, where traditionally Europe was leading European and world football with more than 75% of players registered in European clubs during World Cup. Nowadays we see the trend changing, and we're extremely happy also today to have finalized the opening of our office permanently in Jeddah in the Al-Rawda district. So we're extremely happy to do it also beyond our natural borders, which were also already global. While football is a global sport, we understand also that the reality of club football goes beyond. So this is our representation. We took few countries, maybe you can distinct where the future lies or where the present is already there, thinking specifically where the potential is there, the market potential. And the key findings are very important, because where traditionally in sports, and especially in football, confederations, you tend traditionally to benchmark yourself to a neighboring country, the likes of Mexico comparing themselves to the United States, Japan looking at South Korea, etc. We try to go beyond and to define where you could learn from each other, trying to do for the first time a very different benchmarking, not based on just a vertical knowledge, but also on the very horizontal knowledge. So for that, we will look at the different markets, different football areas, and what we found out, obviously, is that there is a huge passion in those areas, but more importantly, what you have there is the key ingredients. And the key ingredients are definitely passion, demographics, history, but like in any recipe, and I know most of you might be already hungry, you need a good recipe. So today we brought to you the cooks to go further in that. So looking at the map, you would also think necessarily from a geographical perspective, but the very interesting aspect here is, like, for example, the benchmarking or the different leagues to look for Mexico will not be United States, but for example, Japan, because history, passion, TV rights, entertainment, those elements are more comparable. So you need to compare, as we say, apples and pears. So this is why we really look at horizontally those models. Today, I wanted to bring you that knowledge and also bringing, because we do this World Football Summit in Jeddah, to look at beyond our traditional comfort zone, I would say. I just wanted to show quickly the slide with the key findings. This is how we actually distincted the different areas. So we did countries with large population and large GDP, countries with medium population and large GDP, and countries with medium or small population or medium and small GDP. But all of them, they have an extremely impressive potential. But you know, like any potential, it's nice to say, it's another thing to do it. And very last slide before we really start the discussion with the cooks of Football of Tomorrow, this is the key findings. And for our international audience, I'm happy to briefly translate. So countries that want to be top level, they need a domestic strong product, obviously. So the size of the internal market is crucial. You need a strong base. You need a strong local area. You need to have a global language. You need to be focused on the younger generation and their way of accessing, enjoying football. Know-how is vital. You need to teach, but also to learn from the local area, not just by coming with advisors from the world. So that's why for us it's also very, very important to build locally. And MCOs, the multi-club ownership, are certainly a shortcut, but they are a way to go a bit faster, but not necessarily the only one solution. What you need to do, and that's the box below on the left, you need to understand your unique asset, so probably do the internal review of what your strength in your selling proposal is critical. The resources that need to be targeted, so what delivers the really biggest difference, what the so-called consultant would call the USP, the unique selling points, and the alignment and collaboration between the key stakeholders. This is crucial in football. You need to be aligned, you need to create your own local ecosystems. For countries that want to focus on developing talent, you need the size of a domestic talent with a great important pool of players, which is consistent and structured. So not just the top of the pyramid, but also with the bottom. I'm sure our colleagues from Egypt are fully aware what I have in mind. It's equally important to have a structured development and trading routes, because when we look at where the player come from, where they go, all those areas needs to be analyzed. And very importantly, to monitor your market skills and benchmarking your own players against them is vital. Having players abroad is crucial. And the last point was congratulations and enjoy the reading. So let's move to the panel. So thank you very much for our guests to be there. Needless to present Eric Abidal, former player of Barcelona and many other clubs, 2 Champions League, but more importantly, an advisor for clubs and leagues with his experience also off the pitch, so being former sports director at FC Barcelona. Ahmed Abou El Gadaiel, former vice president of Ittihad Club. We wanted to have a local brief to that panel, especially with the experience, what happened in the past, because as we say, you cannot build your future if you don't respect your past. And last but not least, we have Juerg, who came from Bain company, who's going to give us a bit of additional perspective, a global perspective. So thank you very much for being there. Maybe the first question would go to Eric. I've been speaking too much. I do apologize. So thank you very much for your contribution to the report, Eric. Enjoy it. You can download it on the World Football Summit website. We have the pleasure to bring that knowledge and experience. And from your technical point of view, how do you see the difference between Europe and the rest of the world nowadays?
First of all, no. Yes, yes, sorry. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. Very happy to be here with you. Thanks for the World Football Summit for the kind invitation. And as well, I have to thank all the colleagues with me during this panel. I don't know if I can speak about a change or difference between Europe and the rest of the world. We are talking about the same sport, football, but every country has, I would say, different philosophy, different vision, and different manners to manage the sport in their country. We can talk about, of course, club management, because at the beginning we have to, as a country, build clubs, have a vision, see how the numbers of players that we can have, how we will build up the league, the competition. And the difference is maybe the structure that clubs have today. You have clubs or big clubs, I would say institution, where the board members are more than a small club with only 3 persons. So to take a decision is not always easier. and the vision is totally different. When you have only 3 people around the table, I would say that to take a decision is fast, and when you have the board members with 20 or more than this, take time. I have to see exactly what we will do, how we will do it. But the main goal is to achieve at the end the
create revenue streams, how do I actually create a sustainable basis. I would also say at the federation level, one thing that often gets a little bit overlooked is the infrastructure. And we worked a lot in the kingdom, and we see this as an example. And I think a lot of the countries that you looked at, if you looked at the infrastructure, both the physical infrastructure but also the professionals pyramid, we see a lot of gaps in some of these emerging football countries. And a lot of the effort that we put in here in the region is really on building these foundations. And I think we will see over time, if you redo your report, that some of these countries actually slowly start catching up. But it's really important to address this. So physical infrastructure, professionals pyramid. I mean, interesting fact about Saudi, and you probably know this, the average coach tenure in Saudi Arabia is 6 months, right? So you get a coach, they're there for a little bit, and then they're gone. So you're never really able to develop a real game philosophy to really instill a culture into the players, into the youth team. So I think that's an important part to look at as well.
Thank you, Juerg. I think we have our last round for Ahmed, and it's great to have you, especially coming from here, from Jeddah. It's always great to have a representative, a local representative. Ahmed, you are witnessing a tremendous change in the local ecosystem, in the football industry. It's quite impressive. But actually for our Saudi audience, you know what to say. But for our non-Saudi audience today, what are the peculiarities of Saudi football and how Saudi think and feel about their football?
Thank you very much for inviting. We started our first football revolution.
Ahmed. The microphone.
Yeah?
Is it better?
Is it better? We started first football revolution.
Just like gonna ask Ramon to help for the mic.
Like that? Okay. Okay.
Oh, it's good.
We
Thank you.
started, if Saudi remember, during Prince Faisal's time, in the late 70s, we start bringing foreign players, professionals. Actually, this is the time I started interfering in the station in football. It was 1978. We attended Argentina final. To us, we want to have 2 professional players. At that time, you are allowed to register 3, they were 2. Immediately, we saw, I still remember, Thomas Schober, captain of Sweden, he scored the opening goal against Brazil. We thought he would score 100 goals in Saudi Arabia. We will buy him. When he came here, the first match, after 2 minutes, he came to the bench, water. That's how was we were thinking. But we made it lately. This is why Saudi Arabia came. 1984 Olympics finals, or Asian Cup, 88, 1996 Asian Cup again. Because we start discovering at that time, we don't have only to have names, but we have to build up a system, organization in our clubs. We were amateurs at that time. At that time, you never hear about commercials. You never hear about income. There is no professional player, but we did it. If I compare it with this, what is happening now it's a big opportunity for anyone. Not in Saudi Arabia, in the world. I'm telling my people since May, we are now the new direction of football, new football in the area. But we shouldn't do the same mistakes. We have to build, and this is why I was talking to you, Olivier, and it is an honor to have Eric starting here in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia. I make it quite clear. I don't want, it's not my job to bring players. I want to build them as Saudi talent players. Why Saudi Arabia doesn't have single professional player abroad. Our league is better than Chinese, than Korean, than even Japanese, than Egyptian, than African. We don't have a single Saudi professional football player. Why we don't have a professional Saudi sport manager, managing director, to capture this revolution? If it's right to call it, you have to build up your own talent. And it was very nice of Eric and Olivier. Yesterday we were discussing. They said, why Saudi Arabia? You are one of the oldest sport in the region, especially golf. Why you don't have a Saudi talent, a Saudi way of playing or managing? Because we always concern player after he retire or he finish his contract, I want another one. He mentioned it correctly. I think coach, very famous name. I'm just waiting on the loss. He lost 1, 2, 3 games. Thank you very much. I will go for another one. You cannot build a football. If you want to build up a club, and it's a very good chance that one of the new clubs in Saudi Arabia is listening to me now. If you want to make a plan, you have two choices. You will go for 10 years plan to build it slowly and wisely, or you want it quickly. That's mean you need to have a whole team to help you in building your team, not your running team, administration team. You should build your administration team. If you want to help Saudi Arabia, if you want to go in what our leaders want us to be, famous and all over the world, you should prepare Saudi professional player to play in Germany and Italy. You should have a Saudi player to play in Spain, in Real Madrid. This will not happen in 1 minute. You have to make plans, study. We are at that age. We will never stop learning until we die. Every day there is new thing. Every day. I had this report maybe before, I saw it in English. Now I saw new thing. Always updating. You have to capture this developing always. I hope all the best for everyone, and I hope it's time to see us in 2034. Age will not help. The new generation will see Saudi Arabia not hosting the World Cup, winning the World Cup. Now we are looking for Ittihad tonight. We hope all the best, but we should plan very well that Ittihad won the World Cup. Hope all the best for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Actually, there is an interesting thread, so I'm sorry for the two other guests for the time being, but we have very few locations worldwide where you built a very intellectual football world. You have Milan, you have Madrid, you have Manchester, and maybe now you are just launching to the audience today officially, let's build a Jeddah approach.
Saudi Arabia.
So thank you for that, Ahmed. But actually, when you observe this current boom nowadays, currently, I'm also very interested to understand the benchmarks you had at your time, because at that time, obviously, there was no English Premier League, we had no UEFA Champions League. So when you're looking back at who Al-Ittihad was benchmarking, what was your model at the time?
We were normal. Most of the teams at that time were only in Arab world, from Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco. When we start in the late 70s, I remember we went to one of the greatest coaches and managers in football history. He was Dietmar Kramer, German. This guy, he changed the whole vision of us towards football. Al Hilal went for Mario Zagallo from Brazil. Al Nasser went for the Yugoslavian at that time, Kocic. We built up our new style because at that time there were no Premier League to watch online or European or nothing. World Cup once every 4 years. And even our competition, if you remember, was only Golf Cup, lately Asian Cup. But at that time, we were focusing the history of football. We know only Germany, we only know England and Brazil and Italy. I still remember the youth President Prince Faisal, he went for Jamie Hill Academy. He signed with them for 5 years to develop Saudi football. At that time, he brought grammar. Everyone was developing his own club. This is why we helped our national team to win in 1984, after 5 years only. But we have Saudi players. We have only 2 foreigners. So we helped our national team. But at that time, world was not like that. You can hardly see people or meet people who watch a match in the Premier League or in France or in Germany. We people were not like that. But when we were concerning coaches, managers, we got a good name. This was very helpful at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Revolving on what Ahmed said, Eric, come back to you. What do you think are the current benchmarking for Saudi football and the international cases that could find inspiration? And other words is, what can clubs that are seeking a shortcut to develop by learning with successful football, or do they have to build up their own knowledge and experience somehow?
Yeah, I think for them is, I will not say that easier, because Saudi knows football. Is a country where sport is very important. There is a lot of cases and a lot of examples, but I think every country needs to build up its own ecosystem, football ecosystem, with the culture. The vision that they have today, of course, is impacting the world, because attracting top players with a long vision, hosting a World Cup 2034. So there is many things to do. Of course, they start very well. We are talking about youth development. I think today the generation that they have, 14 until 18 years old generation, they will be the one who will play this World Cup. And the question that I have always in mind is why, for example, in Europe, you have African players, you have Asian players from China, Korea, Japan playing in Europe. And this country is a huge country. They love football. They have to develop a new generation. But I think it's just be credible. And to be credible is only, I will say, based on performance. But to have performance, you need a top leagues, top competition for the youth, impact the world, and trust. Because if talent from Africa, and I will not say that Africa is better than Saudi, but the talent is for me the same. I'm not talking about country, we are talking about talent. You just need to have a good development, good coach education, staff education, analysis education, medical staff. We are always talking about structure in the club. I think clubs today here, they are well structured, different, but well structured. And this can make the difference. After that, what I said, they have to build up their own system internally. And they need the clubs for the ecosystem. They need clubs. They need the competition themselves. And after that, sign, as I said before, sign the right person in the right position. But everyone needs to have a responsibility. Because, you know, in many clubs, and I will not say names, but in many clubs, it's always the president taking the right decision, or the last one, and maybe the last one is the wrong one. But who has to assume at the end, they will go to the sport director or the football director, and they're not the one taking the decision. So when you have this, and you have, I would say, club vision, everyone is very important inside. Communication is important, decision maker is important, but if you don't have performance, the club has to be strong. It's not only based on the performance, because sometimes you have the performance and the performance is hiding a lot of problems. But if you don't have the performance, the club has to be strong, developing players and etc., etc. And this is, I think, what Ahmed said just before, that in the history in the past, marketing was not existing, sponsoring was not existing, and today there is a huge impact of that. And I think it's part of the decision for the club to hire top players, because we know with this player we are not talking about performance, we're talking about business. Okay, but as a sport director, okay, it's okay that for the clubs having a lot of money, but I want to win. So we have to find the balance between the athlete, the performance, and what this athlete can bring to the club regarding the marketing and sponsoring.
A few years ago, quoting Carlo Ancelotti, he explained the difference between a club and institution. So we'll come back to you after that. And now, again, a question back to Juerg. I'm very curious to understand, from your perspective, Bain is advising a corporation and clubs are rather small-sized entities with a sport aspect, a business aspect, and a community aspect, which are obviously related to sporting elements and sometimes referees. How do you think we can duplicate corporate practices to small-sized enterprises like clubs?
No, fantastic question. I think globally we see, and all of you see, that a real professionalization in sports, right? I mean, if you look at the recent investments, the last 5-10 years, corporate investors, private equity investors into football clubs, they bring in capital, but at the same time they expect a certain degree of professionalization. I think you mentioned it, you have top players, but they also expect top facilities, top coaches, top teams, right? Psychology, medical. And actually, I think locally what's happening with these top players coming in, that actually is a very strong impetus to really driving the professionalization. So in our view, and I think you mentioned this as well, the decision rights in a club are extremely important. As you mentioned, you don't want to have the president decide on what's the lineup for the game, who should be replaced or substituted in a game, right? You want to have a very professional management in these clubs. So we do believe that professionalization of the operating, what we call operating model, which is basically the governance, the decision rights, the structure, is extremely important to the clubs, right? Because that then will allow the clubs to also work on the sporting performance, but I would also say on the commercial performance. Saudi is a great example, right? Historically, there was a lot of involvement of the government, a lot of government funding. But the real ambition that we have is to create a financially sustainable football sector. And we look at this more like, as you mentioned, this is a corporation ultimately, right? I need to create a profile of players that are actually successful on the pitch, but also we need to create a set of commercial revenue levers that will enable the club to create a positive cash flow in the end. So I think similar to what we see in global top clubs and the professionalization we see there, we see the same happening at the smaller scale, because once you have a successful club that is set up in a right way, in a professional way, that allows these clubs to actually expand and become more of a global performers and global brands.
Couple of more minutes just to close already the panel. Ahmed, you were an executive of Ittihad a few decades back, and at that time Europe was by far the center of football, club football. In the LTT Sports World Football Summit report, we are saying the gravity is shifting. But what do you think are the key elements from today you would love to have back in the past?
First of all, finance. At that time, to run a club, you have to pay from your own pocket. The member of the club gather together, who will take the presidency, okay, how much you will pay per year. Even sometimes we have to pay to the fans to travel with the team. Now, this doesn't exist anymore now. This one. And number two, the industry of football. At that time, we looked at football as a hobby, as a game. Now, football is industry. Now, football is science. We never attended at our time such a conference or such a occasion. It was only thinking we have to run our club, win or lose, we will see the other season. We never planned. But it doesn't exist at that time. I am a president for 1-2 years and that's it. But now I have a target, 2034. That's me. I have to build up for 10 years to gain my work. That's what we were missing at that time. But fly. Thank you.
Eric, you played in Monaco, you played in Olympique Lyon. At that time, those clubs obviously were also performing well domestically. What's the difference with a club like an institution like FC Barcelona? What are the key learnings? Where do you felt it at that time?
The difference is when I was playing in the both club that you said, Monaco and Olympique de Lyon, of course they were, I would say, the strongest one Liga in France, with different vision, because I would say Monaco was a quiet place to train, to develop for the players, but at the same time, the bling life that around the city. And Lyon was a reference, developing players, not only France but for all Europe. And the difference that I saw is when you have opportunity to jump to a big clubs like Barcelona, you are talking about an institution. So the way of management is totally different. All the details are important. The values different. You're playing in a league, French league was strong, but there is different because you have to respect the DNA, a philosophy of play. You have to adapt yourself to new country, new language, new vision, and maybe more pressure. Because Barcelona is a club where you have to win every year. If you are not winning or you draw, this is a disaster. But nowadays you see, I would say, different way, because every club have his story. But the philosophy of Barcelona will never change. But the philosophy of Monaco and Lyon changed already. But because of the DNA or because of the people. Because always changing the people, sometimes you have a different idea. In Barcelona, as an institution, the idea is still the same. Producing players is the same philosophy of play that we want. To, at the end, have a huge percentage of first-team players coming from the academy. It's very difficult to do that, but you have to take a risk. And that's why before I said performance is important, but the club as well is important. So when you have in mind that you have to find the balance between both things, of course it's not always, but needs time. Needs time, and you have to stay strong in the idea that you have. So it's good that here in Saudi there is a huge potential, a long vision. We talk about the World Cup 2034, but each club need for me to have the proper DNA, the proper management, the proper ambition, and follow the line that they have in mind. Mr. Ahmed said that, yeah, at the time you have president, or you said before regarding the coaches, 6 months and go out, because you are thinking only about performance. But performance is not enough. For me, it's not enough, because sometimes you can have a top coaches. I will give an example like Pep Guardiola. He was not winning a Champions League in Bayern Munich. He was not winning Champions League in Manchester City, but he still be a top coach. So sometimes it's not regarding the result that you have, but how you develop players. So when you see and you saw the game, you said, hey, there is a big change between the coach before and the new one. And here has to be the same. I know there is a lot of pressure. Everyone wants to win, but take time. That's why we are talking about clubs and institutions.
From one point of view, I was just saying that we didn't have at that time something called size. What he did mention now, we were talking about yesterday. He said, when you change your coach, you are bringing a new one. Why you don't go for DNA to see if he has the same personality or not? It never existed at our time. DNA didn't exist at that time. This is what I'm talking about. Now you have to talk science, education, not only performance or result on the team. Thank you.
Sorry, if I can add something, because I think it's very important to say that. We said before we were talking about coaches coming, training. If they win, they win. If not, they will go out and they will change the coach. The most important for me is here in your country, all the locals have to be on the staff, all of them. Assistant coach, medical coach, physical, they have to be. Why? Because we are always in mind that the foreigners will come and help us. But we have in the past many examples that foreigners coming, if they win, they win, if they lose, they will go. But in the club, we don't have nothing. No data, no information, a new coach coming with a different staff, different philosophy of play, different attitude. But for me, we have to take care of the clubs. We have to take care of the player, and all the clubs need to have, I will say, the pillars. That's why we are talking about clubs and institution. Institution, there is pillars, and these pillars will never move. And clubs, yes, they can move, but it's always depending on the person.
We had with Ahmed the legacy. We have now Eric explained how it's important to have a self-sustaining ecosystem with the locals. Are you ready for 2034? Thank you very much. God bless you.